Welcome to the Coffee House, where in the next hour, how would you rate your utility's response to Isabel and the late August storm? We'll hear from Pepco customers and Montgomery County Councilman Tom Perez. Chances are you're watching this show on cable giant Comcast, where you probably didn't see much about the recent Montgomery County Workers' Rights Community hearing. Before now, that is. Global warming may not start at home, but Mike Tidwell says there's plenty you can do at your house to halt climate change. We'll hear from the bluesman from Göteborg, Sweden, Robert Lighthouse, plus poet Maritza Rivera's got street smarts, and Photog's Johnny Boucher and Martin Lueders join poet Grant McLeman on the sidewalk. Welcome to the forum at the Coffee House. It's a faint memory now, a late August storm that challenged the durability and security of the electric power system in the region. Some 208,000 Pepco customers lost service, many for a number of days. That prompted two Montgomery County Council members to call a public hearing to discuss what went wrong and how to do it better the next time. Well, that next time came even before the public hearing, in the form of tropical storm, one-time hurricane, Isabel. Two out of three Pepco customers, some 570,000 in all, lost power during Isabel. Record numbers of wires came down. Some 72 miles of cable and 215 poles were destroyed. Over 150 transformers were knocked out. And as Councilmember Tom Perez recalled at the October 1st public hearing, two Pepco crew members died in the restoration effort.
Given the projected magnitude of the storm, we made unprecedented preparations. We brought in crews from other states. We trained additional telephone representatives so that we could allow more customers to speak to a live person, and secured large quantities of electric equipment and materials for the restoration.
Republican Councilmember Howie Dennis wasn't impressed. He termed Pepco's response to Isabel dismal, a view shared by the assembled Pepco customers.
But that you have given us a second-rate power network that doesn't withstand the challenges of the weather. How about giving us a first-rate power network, and you can start by burying the major power lines underground?
This is all kind of ridiculous because Pepco's power went out in Silver Spring in Kensington before the storm started. Why?
In the last two storms, all of us were out of power for 12 days in high-density housing. We were told we had power. That was wrong. We had down lines. Nobody came out. We reported them.
We're all frustrated here. And we feel like we're being led by someone who doesn't know what they're going to do, who's pointing at charts, who's looking at numbers, who said we're going to investigate this, we're going to look into that. Where's your vision?
Our vision is to be a top quartile performer in reliability. That's where we want to be. Are we there now? I would not say we're there now.
Welcome, Councilmember Tom Perez, to the Coffee House.
Good evening.
Not there now? Would you say that is a fair assessment of Pepco's response to the situation, or perhaps an obvious understatement?
I'd call it charitable, Mark. I read all the reports after '99, after Floyd and the ice storm, and there were a host of recommendations that came out of that. And then you fast forward to August of 2003, and it seemed like history repeated itself. I've said that I feel like I'm watching Groundhog Day over and over again here. And it's important to remember that Howie Dennis and I called these hearings because of the first storm. And the August storm. And we had constituent after constituent who'd been out of power for days on end, 5 days. We had senior citizens. I remember a guy named Mel Marks who multiple physical challenges and been calling and calling. He's on their list of people with special needs, but couldn't get a live body.
These are people oftentimes who are on life support systems.
Oh, absolutely. I heard from a constituent who went to a restaurant to have them take their insulin and refrigerate it because they couldn't keep it in their house. And it's thousands of dollars worth of medication. And fortunately, they found a good Samaritan in a restaurant that had a generator.
What were the most common complaints that constituents had?
Responsiveness, I would characterize that. I mean, inability to get a live body, inability to get information. When a crew goes out...
Any information or correct information or both?
Really both. I mean, when the crew goes out in the morning, presumably they have a list of places where they're going. Now, granted, you don't know how long it's going to take to fix a problem. It might take 10 minutes, it might take 5 hours.
But you know what neighborhoods...
But you know what neighborhoods you're going to. You know who's on the list. And to be told, well, it's going to be next Friday at 6 o'clock, which was a time and date that was picked out of thin air, it seems to me, is just not a way to run a railroad.
Now, you called this hearing before Isabel,
right,
after the August storm. Why did you do that? What was it about the response in August that you felt demanded a public hearing?
Well, I mean, the August storms were storms, don't get me wrong. We got a little water in our basement. But, I mean, they were by no means these Category 4 storms that you read about down in Carolina. And it was my basic belief that if we couldn't figure out a way to deal with a storm of that nature, God forbid if we had a terrorist incident or a Category 4 storm or a Category 1 storm. And frankly, the storm Isabel, by the time it got here, was not a hurricane. It was a tropical storm. And as one of your listeners or one of the people on the tape point out, they lost their power at 4 in the afternoon on the 18th. And that's when we lost our power as well. It really makes you wonder about the infrastructure and the overall responsiveness and whether there have been any lessons learned from 99.
Let me try to make a kind of backhanded defense of Pepco here,
sure,
which is that Pepco is a victim of a weather system that we're facing now and a weather future that we're going to encounter that they weren't planning for when they built the aerial lines. That in the face of a warming planet, in the face of climate change, that we're going to get more severe weather. And they just didn't build their system, nor did other utilities build their systems in America in response to that. And so shouldn't we expect this sort of outcome when we have a storm then?
Well, first of all, that's a nice defense, but I think in the end not an adequate defense. You look at, I spoke to a lot of line people, and mostly people from out of state, because I just wanted to get a handle from them. And these are folks with no dog in the fight. They're here just doing the job, and they're heroes in my mind. And the two things I heard most frequently, and this was a very unscientific survey, I will grant you, but were the issues of tree trimming and how this would never be the case where we are in terms of the way power lines were going in between trees. Clearly, Pepco had not been doing enough in that regard, and the county for that matter.
And that was one of the points that was made in the 99 report.
Absolutely.
Right.
What is your tree trimming policy? What are you going to do? Mm-hmm. But the second issue that was brought up was the infrastructure, mm-hmm. and that it really was it was old, and the question becomes, what incentive does Pepco have? When your shareholders want a profit, what incentive do you have to invest in your infrastructure? The customers. If I don't like Burger King, I go to McDonald's. If I don't like Kmart, I can go to Target. But I'm out of luck when it comes to power. I'm stuck with Pepco, and they know it. And so there's not that incentive to invest in the infrastructure unless and until I think people at a grassroots level continue to agitate for better service.
One solution that people are proposing is to start burying the lines, at least the major transmission lines. Pepco says that that will cost 10 times as much money than continuing to build the aerial lines. But they're willing to begin to look at that as a possibility. It's certainly done in Europe. They build it with tunnels so that they can be maintained like a sewer system. But nonetheless, they're not foolproof, and backhoes cut through them, whatever. What do you think about that?
Right. Well, it's important to know it's not only done in Europe, it's done in Montgomery County.
In new development.
And if you geo-mapped what happened to us during these storms, it's not a surprise that Bethesda, Silver Spring, Kensington, Tacoma Park bore the brunt of it, because that's where you have the most mature communities, age-wise, and mature trees, things like that. And so, I mean, we are burying them here. I mean, I think it's something we have to look into as a Homeland Security matter. And it may take a while to accomplish this, but the question I always ask when we talk about cost is not only to look at the cost of burying, but to look at the cost of not doing it. And the cost of these storms, the economic cost of these storms, was in the billions of dollars. The problem with that argument is that from Pepco's perspective, it's what economists would call an externality. It's not a cost I bear, it's a cost someone else bears, so why do I care about that?
Right.
And it's our job, I think, as political people and people in the community who were affected, to make sure they do care.
Do you think Pepco's getting the message? They brought in the former FEMA director to do a study, emergency preparedness director to do a study. The Public Service Commission of Maryland is going to do their own review. Do you think Pepco's getting the message at this point?
Well, I have to say I was profoundly disappointed at the hearing in terms of the inability to simply say, we're sorry for what happened. We regret any inconvenience that this may have caused is not, we're sorry for what happened.
Mistakes were made.
Mistakes were made. It was the passive voice. It was passing the buck. This was extraordinary. How many times did we hear extraordinary? Well, yes, we had a bad storm, but there were management failures, there were communication failures, and they would have diffused 90% of the anger in that room if they had started out by simply saying, we recognize that we inconvenienced you, and yes, while there were things that were extraordinary that happened, we screwed up in many respects, and we're here to learn, and we're here to make it different, and we're here to improve. I didn't hear that. I heard excuses.
I know your own review process for what should be done isn't completed, but at this point, what do you think should be done?
Well, I think there's a number of things, and I as I said at the hearing, and I've said other times, I actually think that one of the big issues, is the power outage that remains, is the bargaining power. I am really concerned that at the PSC level and at every other level, there's not enough citizen input, and people get on with their lives as they get their electricity back. There will be a lot of well-paid lobbyists who are going to go into Annapolis and lobby that undergrounding task force to basically bury the report, so to speak.
As opposed to the cables.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so I think we need to address that by either enacting some sort of consumer's bill of rights or some sort of civilian complaint oversight mechanism built into the PSC. We do this in policing. I used to work with police departments and communities across the country to establish civilian complaint review. We ought to look at that here. Undergrounding is helpful, and we need to seriously consider it. But if you focus only on the capital improvements, then you ignore the management failures. And we need to focus on a lot of the management failures, the communication gaps, the whole, we won't even get into the dry ice debacle, but and then the whole triage system. I mean, seniors, we need to develop a capability of making sure that we have some way of communicating with our seniors and helping them and vulnerable people, and making sure that schools, while certainly they shouldn't be in the priority of the police and fire and places like that. I mean, have a school closed for 4 or 5 days after. I mean, you can't close the gap if you can't get the lights on.
Well, we're going to have to turn our lights off on this segment right now, I'm afraid. I want to thank Montgomery County Councilman Tom Perez for joining us in the coffee house. No one could any longer claim surprise We know that terrorists saw on CNN or Al Jazeera the chaotic impact the August and September power outages had. We also know with ever greater scientific confidence that as the Earth warms, weather events will become increasingly severe. There should be a clear message in this for public officials and utility executives about how to build an electrical system that can stand up to the 21st century. I'm Mark Cohen, and this has been Coffee House Forum.
Trained in the mind to think only the purest thoughts, I descend to the part they call downtown, past the fast food temples that become just hamburger joints, the party shops that become liquor stores with peeling paint and huge signs, past the gas stations that even in a country made for cars become almost vacant lots, past the paraphernalia of the poor, until, thinking less than pure thoughts, I arrive on sidewalks where an unknown hand has thrown people like dice on the blue baize of a summer's evening. Watch out for Snake Eyes. He darts through pockets like ideas darts through the minds of the restless, and may steal your dreams before you're able to buy them. I cross the street, avoiding the taxis carrying the messages of the night, carry my hopes in front in a brown paper bag made for the mind, a mind that is a busy wishbone. I come up to the door, thinking impure thoughts, and knock 3 times.
Cheo learned to run like his life depended on it. His playground was a fenced lot between tenement buildings where trucked-in sand filled the tot box and cushioned his bounding feet under the seesaw. The tar-paved courts melted in the sweltering sun where his rubber-soled kids would stick if he stood still long enough. But basketball and handball were played too hard and too fast for anyone to ever sink into the slowly boiling lava. Girls played hopscotch and double dutch on the sidewalk, where boys, not playing stickball in traffic, hugged the walls ready to catch a flyball glimpse of errant skirts lifting in the dog-day air, exposing bare young legs, already pounding the pavement. I watched Cheo play tag once and was amazed. His arms thrashed at the stagnant air, pushing, shoving, clearing invisible obstacles from his path. His head dodged stray bullets, and his feet thrust him forward like a blast from a silent cannon, propelling him out of reach. As he panted for breath, sweat gushed like blood from a fresh wound, but he was safe. Cheo learned to run like his life depended on it, and it served him well on city streets where playing isn't always just for fun.
Welcome to WorkLife at the Coffee House. There's a good chance you're watching this program over the Comcast cable network. Comcast is the largest cable company in America, controlling 40% of the cable television market. Ever wonder what it would be like to work for Comcast? Many of the folks who work there are trying to organize a union. Let's find out something about what's been going on with that organizing campaign. Joining me is Pat Hunt of the Communication Workers of America. Pat is involved not only in the Montgomery County Comcast organizing campaign, but also in other Comcast organizing campaigns around the country. Pat, nice to have you with us in the Coffee House today.
It's nice to be here.
So, how did the effort to organize Comcast workers in Montgomery County start?
Well, I think what started it was the company's policies. The workers feel that they're very aggressive and not very sensitive to the workers' needs, and so they brought that message to us. They called us and asked if we could help them organize. They felt that decisions were arbitrary, schedules were changed inappropriately, It was hard to do daycare or have child care responsibilities if your quit time changed day to day. So they had problems, and they came to the union to have them addressed.
But tell us something about elsewhere around the country, other campaigns, organizing campaigns of Comcast workers.
Well, Comcast, as you said, is one of the largest cable company in the country, and they provide service in about 20 major cities. And we actually have campaigns going on in all 20 cities. The policy of how they treat the workers is a corporate policy run out of the headquarters in Philadelphia. And it creates problems in the workplace. And workers, the only way to address this thing in any sort of a responsible way is through a union. And so we get almost daily contacts from Comcast workers. We have an election later this month in Dallas for 90 technicians. We have campaigns at different stages in the 20 cities around the country, 20 major cities.
20 major cities?
Yes, sir.
There are campaigns going. Okay, let's go back to Montgomery County, the Montgomery County campaign. So what happened? How did this? What happened once this campaign started? Was there a petition filed with the National Labor Relations Board for an election, and where does that all stand at this point?
Right, yes. Well, what happens when workers want to have an election? They form their organizing committee, and to get a board certified election, you need to have collect signatures. And since Comcast is very tough and very anti-union, we always make sure there's at least 60% of the people in the unit on signatures. They collected those signatures.
So that meant 60% actually supported the union at that point?
Exactly right. This was in early spring. But once the election date was settled, established, Comcast really came down on the workers very hard. They had first weekly and eventually daily meetings, what we call captive audience meetings, where people would come and tell them why they didn't want a union. Comcast does this all over the country. We have one example where they flew a lawyer in to a place where we were organizing, dressed him up as a technician, and he addressed the workers for an hour as if he was a worker. Not fair, but that's what they do. They also, and they did it in Montgomery County, they have ride-alongs. They put a supervisor in the truck, and he spends 8 hours not only evaluating your work, but telling you why you don't want a union. Very hardball. So those things went on in Montgomery County, and over time, it worked to the company's advantage. People were intimidated. People were harassed. People did feel like their job might be in jeopardy if they exercised the right to join a union. And so what happened there was at some point it became clear that in spite of the community support, that they didn't have a majority anymore, that the company's intimidation tactics had worked, and they withdrew the petition.
So they withdrew the petition for the election. So does that mean it's all over? The campaign is over in Montgomery County?
Oh, not at all. If they'd had an election, they would have had to wait a year before the next election. This way, they can continue to organize, and they continue to do that.
So the withdrawal of the petition was a strategy to keep the campaign going?
Exactly right. And it was the workers' strategy. It was their decision to do that. They counted heads. And unfortunately, Comcast counts heads, too. Comcast actually makes a list of all the employees. We've seen some of these lists. And it's very troubling, and it should be troubling to people in the community, and I think it is. I mean, some of the things on the list I once saw was said, Johnny, not a good worker, but he's with us. And so apparently you don't have to work hard if you're against the union. Another one that was really concerned me was said, Bill, a school teacher, can't be trusted. And so they don't want folks to think for themselves. They want the company to do all the thinking for them.
So where is the campaign now? What's going on? What's happening in the campaign?
Well, what's happening is the workers continue to meet and encourage support. But also what's happening is the community in Montgomery County has really got involved in a big way.
How is that involvement shown? I mean, what kind of things have happened in the community?
Well, they had, back in July, there was a workers' rights board hearing. We had community leaders, two city council people, a state legislator, a rabbi, a Methodist minister, different people, and workers came in and testified, not just Comcast workers, but other workers came and talked about what was going on when workers tried to organize. And I think these community leaders were very upset that the standards that we like to think are our standards here in Montgomery County weren't being met.
So the standards weren't being met. Have there been anything to address the question of standards?
Yeah, absolutely. This body, these community leaders got together and they issued some standards. And And they've asked not only Comcast, but other employers in the community here in Montgomery County to adhere to these standards. And the standards say no intimidation, no harassment of workers, directly or indirectly. They're asking to adhere to that, and they're asking them to avoid confrontation and actually do card check recognition rather than having a contentious election. If majority of the workers decide they want to have a union and you have someone like religious leaders verify the signatures and there's a majority, indeed they should recognize them that way. They're trying to take the conflict out of it and have good Montgomery County community standards involved in the process.
So these community standards, does it just apply to this, to the Comcast campaign? I mean, is the idea that it's...
Not at all. This is, as we all know, Montgomery County is a very wealthy county, but everybody that lives and works here isn't wealthy. This applies to everyone who has a right to organize and chooses to exercise that right. One of the standards is that they will respect the workers' choice and not have captive audience meetings, not have ride-alongs, not have drive-by people's homes to see if workers are meeting there to organize a union. These are all things that have gone on in Comcast.
So the idea is the public leaders are trying to establish a code of conduct of sorts that would apply to all employers doing business in the county, and of course they're not requiring this. This is something that they're urging employers to do. Right. Is that the idea?
They're urging employers, and they'd very much like all the employers to adhere to these standards. They are urging them at this point, yes.
But let me ask you this. I mean, ultimately, it's the workers, the employees, that have to make the decision about whether or not they want to be represented by a union. And so it's nice for the community to get involved, but really, since it's the workers who ultimately decide, how does the community getting involved really affect that decision?
Well, it affects it in this fashion. Comcast, in lots of ways, is like a big bully, and they not only bully workers, they also bully cities. Right now, they have a lawsuit against San Jose because San Jose has asked the Comcast to adhere to the refranchising standards that are commonly practiced. The city of Portland, Oregon, is concerned about the privacy policies that Comcast has unilaterally changed. Modesto is being sued by the company because they tried to enforce safety standards. The community coming together telling Comcast you can't push the community around and you can't push the workers around gives the workers strength. They understand that it's not just their fight, that Comcast may be only concerned about the bottom line, but the leaders in their community are concerned about other things as well. And I think the workers feel very supported, and I think the community feels that that they and not Comcast gets to establish the standards here in Montgomery County.
So has it had an effect? I mean, is this kind of community support and community efforts, does it make a difference in the way the workers see this organizing campaign?
Oh, I think it absolutely does. I mean, Comcast, one of the things they tell workers constantly is things won't change if the union comes in. Working together won't give you any power. And when they see the likes of the city council people like George Leventhal and Tom Perez and other people stand with them, they feel the power. I think it's making a big difference.
Well, thank you, Pat Hunt of CWA, for taking the time to tell us your story about the campaign to organize Comcast workers in Montgomery County. The Comcast campaign and others like it suggest that there are changes in the way unions are going about organizing. I guess it's still a little early to tell how these new approaches, what kind of a difference they might make, but time will tell. I'm Fred Feinstein, and thank you for joining us on WorkLife.
So starving, being fed junk food and MTV. So starving, being fed junk food and MTV. They say if you join army, you can be all that you could be. Homeland stolen, built up by people stolen from there. Homeland stolen, built up by people stolen away from there. When Mr. Bush, when you speak of axes of evil, you better think of your own homeland affairs. Weapons of mass destruction. The biggest risk is bad health and obesity. Weapons of mass destruction. The biggest risk is bad health and obesity. Well, Joe Sixpack, I hope you listen. Stay away from junk food and bad TV.
I'd like to welcome you to the musical tradition segment of the Coffee House.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
What was that one called?
That one was called Homeland Security Blues.
It doesn't seem like you pulled that out of 1928 or something.
No.
That's one you wrote?
Yeah, just trying to put, I did write that a couple of days ago.
It's neat though how you fit it into that style, you know, that old style. I got to tell you that I guess we've known each other a long time, but I probably have never told you this story. I'd heard you on recording before we actually met, or actually seen you. And I remember I was going to be out at the Washington Folk Festival with a booth out there, and you were going to be playing. I thought, oh great, I'll get to meet you. And I was pretty sure I was going to be meeting about a 45-year-old black guy playing the blues. And I remember coming around the side of the Cuddle Up stage at Glen Echo, and I was like, wait a minute, this can't be. How did this happen? You're from
Sweden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I guess I really got into blues when I was about 15.
Yeah.
I always liked music and
you were playing guitar before that.
Yeah.
And then somebody.
Yeah, a friend of mine that he introduced me to like Muddy Waters and Johnny Winter, Hendrix, and then once I heard Hendrix, and I was pretty much gone.
Yeah.
For blues. Yeah.
And then from that time, when did you first come to America?
I was actually 18 the first time I came here.
Yeah.
So and I was here for a couple of months, and I went back, and then I came here again in 1987.
And you've been here since then, really?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Making life as a pretty good blues singer.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you mix sort of Hendrix's vocal style with a pre-war playing style. I mean, that's you. That's nobody else is really doing that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. You got another tune for us?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Let's take us home with that one.
All right.
Make my baby cry, don't leave her alone. Used to make her smile, she wanna alone. One night found me when I was alone, and it took me to a house. Me and her used to have a home. She one I love, the one I love. We've been walking where the sun never go down. We've been driving through storms of snow and sand. I used to be a man a long time ago. She made beautiful things. Wrote a story about a turtle and a fish. Used to run around wearing wings. She wanna love one I love. Well, desire always on my mind. My eyes got so big, my heart went blind. It happened all the time. Oh my. But she got dark brown hair and a freckle on the nose. From her head down to her toes, she wanna love the one I love.
Hi, my name is Mike Tidwell. I live in Tacoma Park, Maryland with my wife, Catherine Varshiver, and our 5-year-old son, Sasha. Today, I want to welcome you to our home. We have something of a pioneering home here in that we power our house almost entirely with the solar technology that you see behind me on my roof and other solar technology. And we heat our home with biomass energy, which is just a fancy way of saying that in the winter, we heat our home by burning corn, if you can believe it. My wife and I made all these changes to our house because of our deep concern for the rapidly growing crisis of global warming and how it's going to affect where we live here in the Chesapeake region. And what I'd like to do is take you through our home, through the rest of this film, step by step, and show you how we were able to pay for these technologies and implement them practically in our house, and how you may be able to do the same thing wherever you live, in a rural area, a city, or the suburbs of Virginia, Maryland, or DC, and also show you how we were able to pay for all these technologies for only $1 a day out of our pocket, a very affordable way to go. And so why don't we get started? We're going to take you through the house and you can learn how you too can make exciting changes in your home to help fight global warming. Let's get started. Hi, well, welcome to my house, and we're going to begin the tour here in the family room where we spend most of our time. And as you can see, we have a nice flame going here. No, it's not wood. Actually, we're burning corn. That's how we heat our house, a renewable energy corn, as opposed to fossil fuels of natural gas to heat our home. This is a corn burning stove. We have a hopper in the back that holds up to 75 pounds of corn, fully automatic. You don't have to do anything but light the stove and let the corn come out. There's a little auger here that automatically brings the corn from the hopper into the flame, and then a fuel stirrer that stirs it. So everything that you would do manually in a fireplace, i.e. add the logs with your hands and then poke it and stir it to get it to burn, this does automatically with the help of electricity and a little computer circuit board on the side. Very modern, very convenient. We can load this thing, heat our home for a day and a half to 2 days without ever touching it. And this one stove, if you can believe it, actually heats almost our entire home. This house was built in 1915, and for the first time since it was built, last winter we never used our cast iron radiators. We only used this corn stove with the help of a few ceiling fans and the fact that heat rises upstairs this stove heated our home. The stove creates a friendly background hum and creates a wonderful fireplace ambiance 24 hours a day.
I was really skeptical when Mike first mentioned the idea of a corn-burning stove. I had this image in my mind of kernels of corn popping all over the place and not a lot of heat being produced, and it just sounded kind of crazy. And it turned out to be fantastic. The house is warm, warmer than it's been in years since we've been conserving energy, and people are drawn to it. Our friends like to gather around it, our cats like to gather around it, and we find ourselves choosing to do things here around the fire rather than sit in front of the TV, for example, which is a great plus. And our 5-year-old loves it too, so it's a win-win all the way around.
But how does corn compare to natural gas or oil for home heating? Actually, corn is cheaper. Last winter we saved about $200 to $300 using corn to heat our home. But where in the world do we get the corn to heat our home here in an urban area? Well, we could drive 40 miles to a farm in Mount Airy where we get our corn, but we've solved that problem by actually getting a corn silo, a 20-ton corn silo that's now in Tacoma Park City property. The manufacturer of the stove actually gave us the grants to pay for the corn silo because they knew that they would sell more stoves if there were such a silo, and that is in fact the case. Now we just go a couple of blocks to this corn silo on city property, get the corn that we need, those of us who heat our homes with corn in Tacoma Park. Everybody wins, the manufacturer, the dealer of stoves, the city for its pollution laws, and individual consumers for the convenience of supply and lower price because we're buying in bulk. It's an excellent example of what communities can do in public-private partnerships to solve the problem of global warming when they put their heads together. Everybody wins. Okay, we've come back outside to see the other half of the corn burning equation. This is the vent. This is where the emissions from the corn stove are brought out. Right now, corn is being combusted inside, the house is being heated, that flame is still going on. But as you can see, there's virtually no smoke coming out of this vent. If you look at it from about 10 different angles, you might see a faint wisp of smoke, but virtually no smoke, no particulates. Corn burns very, very cleanly. This allows you to vent the stove almost anywhere in your house if your stove is next to a wall, or you can put it into your fireplace chimney. But you're not even limited to that. You could put this stove anywhere because it burns and emits almost no particulates. The smell, vaguely like grilled corn, not popcorn as some people think, and the smell dissipates after about 50 feet, such that your neighbors won't even know you're burning corn. If you're going to heat your home with corn as a way of fighting global warming, it's important to remember two things about how the corn has to be raised. Number one, find a farmer who's using no-till agriculture. Lots of farmers in this region use it. This allows them to grow corn without tilling the soil, because if you till the soil, you actually increase erosion and you flush carbon dioxide out of the soil into the atmosphere, which accelerates global warming. Number two, find a farmer who's using organic methods to fertilize his fields with turkey manure, cow manure, other forms of green fertilizers. This allows you to avoid petroleum-based fertilizers, which actually, again, accelerate global warming. So no-till agriculture and organically fertilized. That's the way you raise clean corn. But does burning corn to heat your home actually help fight global warming? The answer is yes. Why? Because when corn grows, it absorbs carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, just like any living plant, a tree, a shrub, grass. And when you burn it, it actually releases no more carbon dioxide than it absorbed when it grew. So that is a wash. Now, there are some fossil fuel inputs on the farm side. Diesel fuel for the tractor, for the combine, some natural gas to shell and dry the corn, and of course gasoline to transport the corn from the farm to the house. But even if you factor in all of these inputs, these fossil fuel inputs on the farm side, it still comes out to an 85% reduction in terms of CO2 emissions using corn over natural gas. Corn is clean energy. The next step on our home tour brings us back up to the roof where we started. You'll see around me 36 photovoltaic solar panels. What that means is that these panels are actually converting sunlight into electricity, and that electricity, as I speak right now, is powering everything in our house, from our refrigerator to the microwave to the stereos, you name it. It's all coming from the sun right now. The way it works is that sunlight strikes these panels, it creates a field of electrons which are then grouped into a current that goes into the basement where a special computer device converts it to electricity that then can power our house. What's interesting about these panels is that they were actually made by one of the largest oil companies in the world, British Petroleum. These panels, in addition, are very quiet. In fact, they make no noise at all because there are no moving parts. They also create electricity on cloudy days. Now, this form of renewable energy technology is actually kind of expensive compared to other kinds of renewable energy. However, what made it affordable for my family is that we did our homework. We found a grant program that was being offered by the state of Maryland that was open to all homeowners. We took advantage of a special Maryland tax incentive to go solar. And in addition to that, we put the panels up ourselves, which was actually easier than you think because the panels are easily fit together and any moderately handy person can do it. We had our solar contractor do all the hard work in wiring the panels to the basement and to the grid, but we did the grunt work, bringing the price way down and putting the panels on the roof ourselves. Also, of course, sunlight is free. There's no price on sunlight. And if you were to consider the cost of installing the system, this system will actually pay for itself during the lifetime of the panels, which is about 30 years. So in essence, we're creating free electricity and we're not paying for it, taking advantage of what's offered to all of us for free from the sun. Why don't we now go and see if the panels are actually creating electricity like I told you? I'll prove it to you. Let's go. This is our electricity meter, and if you look closely, you'll see that it's actually running backwards. The numbers are getting smaller. Why is that? Because all those solar panels that you saw on the roof on this average sunny day are actually creating more electricity than we're using. Everything in our house is currently being powered by solar electricity, but we're creating more than we need. So what do we do with the surplus? Well, we're actually storing it with the grid, with Pepco, our local utility. Instead of buying environmentally damaging and expensive batteries to store electricity, we let the grid work for us. Now what's happening is the electricity is literally running in the reverse along the line that connects our house to the grid. Now what happens is at night when the sun sets and we're no longer creating electricity with our solar panels, but of course we're still using electricity, our meter will then begin to run forward. And that's how we keep our account square with the utility. Maryland, like Virginia and 33 other states in the United States, has a law called a net metering law. It requires our local utility to take our excess electricity, store it for us, and give it back to us at the end of the day. What this does is it allows us to save several $1,000s by not buying batteries, using the grid as a battery. And interestingly enough, all electricity meters, average meters, will run backwards and forwards. So we didn't have to buy a new meter. This thing, who knew, can run backwards and forwards. Makes it real simple to go solar. Okay, we've come to the basement to complete our tour and understanding how the solar electricity system and the solar hot water systems actually work. Right here you can see this is called a solar inverter. What it is doing is it is converting electricity that's coming down from the roof as direct current electricity and converting it to alternating current electricity, which is what we use in the house. That's what this little computer gadget's doing. Here you have our solar hot water tank, which is well insulated, as you can see. We have a pump right here, a small pump that pumps the water up onto the roof. That water then is coiled to that solar hot water collector on the roof. It gets very, very hot because sunlight is being trapped as infrared heat in a greenhouse effect. Then it is pumped back down here and coils through this solar hot water tank, and that's how we get our hot water. Now you can see we still have our gas hot water tank, and that's because on cloudy days we still use gas as needed. But we have this as a backup so that we're guaranteed hot water year-round, even on cloudy days. But we still get about 60 to 70% of our hot water from the sun. Now we have come to the most important part of our tour of our home today. If you remember nothing that I say during this tour today, remember what I'm going to say here in the kitchen. Why? Well, because of all the things you're going to see today, the really interesting things like the corn burning stove, the gadgetry of the solar electricity panels, the electricity meter running backwards, all the things that you're seeing today. For me, the one thing that impresses me the most in terms of its contribution to fighting global warming through clean and efficient energy is actually this refrigerator. That may sound strange, but first of all, let's take a look at it. This refrigerator, as you can see, is working very, very hard. We've got, it's making ice, we've got cold beer, we've got food in there. It's really full. It's working hard 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. But this refrigerator actually uses the electricity equivalent of a 50-watt incandescent light bulb. This thing sips electricity. This refrigerator by itself keeps as much carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere every year compared to the old model that we had before it than all of those solar panels that you see on the roof. This refrigerator by itself helps fight global warming as much as all those solar panels. So obviously, if it uses so little electricity, yet works so hard and does everything we expect a fridge to do, it must cost $10,000, and it was obviously designed for the space shuttle. Wrong. This is actually a Sears Kenmore refrigerator, a good old-fashioned Sears refrigerator. You can go to Sears, Costco, Walmart, any place that sells refrigerators and large appliances, and you can buy one of these. All you have to do is look for the EPA Energy Star label, and also remember this number, 450. Why? Because refrigerators, by law, when they're sold, have to tell you how many kilowatt hours of electricity per year they use. And if you can find one that uses 450 kilowatt hours of electricity a year or less, you have a very efficient refrigerator. It's going to save you money. What is the cost of one of these miraculous refrigerators? Actually, you can get one of these. It's really, really efficient for between $550 and $690. And in addition to that, this refrigerator actually is bigger than the 10-year-old model we replaced it with. And it saves us about $100 a year. So we expect to pay for this in just a few years. Also, if you live in Maryland, you'll save money on a state sales tax because our state has removed the sales tax on energy efficient appliances, just like the state has removed the sales tax on a corn stove, because our state wants to encourage us to buy environmentally friendly appliances. Another way that you can dramatically reduce your electricity use is by switching from the conventional incandescent light bulbs like this to much more energy efficient compact fluorescent light bulbs. These bulbs use a quarter of the electricity of incandescent bulbs. They will save you, therefore, $40 during their lifetime and will actually keep 800 pounds of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere per light bulb. The light bulb in this lamp is actually an 80-watt incandescent light bulb, perhaps the kind that you have in your house now. It puts out a pretty nice light. And here now is a fluorescent light bulb, also 80 watts, and it puts out a very similar nice warm glow. Another way to reduce your electricity load without compromising your modern lifestyle in any way is to stop leakage of electricity in your house. What is leakage? Leakage is the stereo that's glowing at you all the time even though you're not listening to the stereo. It's the cable box that's glowing and warm to the touch 24 hours a day even though you only watch maybe an hour and a half of TV that day. In our house, what we've done is we plug the stereo and the TV into this power strip right here, and now when we want to listen to the stereo, we turn on two buttons instead of one, the power strip and the stereo. And when we're done with listening to the stereo or watching TV, we just turn one switch off. And everything is turned off. We're not leaking any electricity. Same with our fax machine, our at-home fax machine upstairs. Most households it's on 24 hours a day, even though you may get 1 or 2 faxes a month. We plug the fax machine into a power strip. When we're going to get a fax, we turn the power strip on. Americans as a nation leak enough electricity to power all of Chicago annually. We can stop that with these easy measures that actually save you money. Another way we save electricity is by drying our clothes in the backyard clothesline on nice days. It's a little bit more effort, but our clothes actually last longer this way, which is another way we save money. One other totally painless step that we take to save electricity is we never, ever, ever leave a light on in a room without a human being in it. When we leave a room, we simply reach for the switch and turn it off. So let's review the easy steps that we took to help cut our electricity use. Number 1, buying an energy efficient refrigerator. Number 2, switching to compact fluorescent light bulbs. Number 3, stopping all electricity leakage with power strips in our house. Number 4, making sure no lights are on in unoccupied rooms. And number 5, on nice days, drying our clothes on a line. By taking these easy 5 steps, we were able to cut our electricity use 55% without in any way compromising our modern lifestyle. Okay, let's cut now to the bottom line. What is it like each month when we get our utility bills? Well, in our household, it's a satisfying occasion to see the concrete results of our efforts to help stop global warming. For example, our last 2 summer electricity bills were less than $8 each. We don't have the electricity burden of central air, but in this old house with its high ceilings and thick walls, we get by fine in the summer with 1 window unit, ceiling fans, and a sleeping porch. And our gas bill from last winter, the height of the winter, was only $16.50. It was $250 the February before to pay for all the gas to heat our home. But the nice utility bills for us are just icing on the cake. Remember, we're doing all this to fight global warming. By making these changes, we cut our CO2 emissions at our home from 19,488 pounds per year to just over 2,000 pounds per year, a drop of almost 90%. So from all my family, we want to thank you for being our guest today. We enjoyed showing you our home. And remember that all the changes we made in terms of renewable energy and energy efficiency are available to everyone, even average people of modest income like ourselves. We spent just over $7,500, as I mentioned earlier, and if you subtract our average monthly energy savings from our monthly home equity loan that we took out to pay for everything you saw today, it comes out to just $30 a month difference that comes out of our pocket, just $1 a day, basically the cost of a cup of coffee a day. So clearly, average people can make these changes too. People in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C., join us in fighting global warming. Thanks for being our guest.